You're listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 371.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? It's Thursday, which means it's not only the day when my shows are released, but also the day that I record. So I am here in my cookbook bunker, very excited to be here, and I have been working hard behind the scenes to create something very special for all of you. So we are just back from a wedding in Lexington. Fall is here. And on Monday, October the 20th, I am starting a brand new training called Publish Your Cookbook. So if you are a food, nutrition, or culinary professional who dreams of publishing a cookbook, I want you to join me for this free masterclass. We are going to learn all about the shortcut that most aspiring authors miss. And this is going to be talking all about how you can get paid to write your cookbook manuscript. You do not need to write your whole manuscript first. You're going to discover how to position yourself as the author that publishers want to publish right now and follow some steps to land your very first cookbook deal. So this is an opportunity you are not going to want to miss. You can head to www.publishcookbooks.com. I have a link down in the show notes and register for this free training. I can't wait to see you all there. I also want to give a quick shout out to Mary, a longtime listener of Cookbook Love Podcast, who recently shared in our Confident Cookbook Writer Facebook group that she self-published a cookbook. So congratulations, Mary. I'm going to read what you wrote to me so that we can celebrate you. She says, I am not in Maggie's writing programs, but I want to thank Maggie for the amazing Cookbook Love podcast. I've been binging for the past 2 years, and I wouldn't have finished my book without your guidance. So if you want to join us inside the Confident Cookbook Writer Facebook group, there's a link also below in the show notes. You can head to the Facebook group, join us there, read Mary's post, hear all about the beautiful book that she wrote about traditional Caribbean cooking for people with chronic diseases, and help us celebrate her accomplishments. For those of you that are building a business or working on a business, I want to remind you that helping people in advance of them ever paying you is the way we market our businesses. And what has just transpired here with the podcast and with Mary and with her publishing the podcast and never having been in one of my programs is a perfect example of how that happens. We share value as cookbook writers that helps other people, helps them enough that they could even do the very thing that we talk about all the time that we love to do, we want to encourage them to do. And even if they never pay us, they can get results in their own life, which is truly an amazing thing. So I want you to share and spread the word about this podcast. This podcast has been going for over 6 years. We have 371 episodes. We've talked to hundreds of cookbook writers. I've done hundreds of solo shows. People are getting results in publishing cookbooks just from listening to the podcast. Not to mention the results that people are getting inside my programs, which which I talk about. I have a self-publishing program and I have a traditional publishing program, and results that people get from coming to masterclasses. So a couple things that you need to do today. Number one, register for the masterclass. The link is below in the show notes, publishcookbooks.com. Number two, I want you to join us in the free Facebook group, The Confident Cookbook Writer. The link is below in the show notes. And number three, Share the podcast with family and friends, people who love cookbooks, who want to read, write, or collect cookbooks, or who already do, because I think they would thoroughly enjoy the interviews with all the people here on the show. And today is no exception. I have a guest named Mary Bryant Schrader, who is the creator of Mary's Nest, a beloved YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers and more than 600 videos on traditional cooking skills. Think bone broth, sourdough, and fermentation. Mary's new book, The Modern Pioneer Pantry, a complete guide to preserving food, brings timeless wisdom into today's kitchen. During the episode today, we talk all about what traditional foods really are, why food preservation matters now more than ever, her concept of the Four Corners Pantry, and lessons Mary has learned from not only running a YouTube channel, but from being a cookbook author. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Mary Bryant Schrader. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Hi, Maggie. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yes, very excited to have you here today to talk all about your beautiful new book, The Modern Pioneer Pantry. But before we dive into the book, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Oh, thank you. Well, my name is Mary Schrader. Yes, on my books, it does say Mary Bryant Schrader, which I always feel sounds a little fancy, but there are a number of Mary Schraders out there who publish. So my editor said, what's your middle name? So, but Mary Schrader is generally what I go by. I'm the creator of the marysnest.com website, and I have a YouTube channel by the same name, Mary's Nest. And on that, I create videos that are also embedded in my website with printable recipes, all about how to make traditional foods. And when I say traditional foods, what I'm talking about is like meat on the bone, cultured dairy, ferments, sourdough, and all of the recipes that have been passed down to us from our ancestors basically over a millennial. These are traditional ancestral recipes, because I think it's very important that we preserve the way our ancestors made food to maximize nutrition and digestibility and keep ourselves as healthy as possible. And I live in Central Texas, in the Texas Hill Country. I'm a former New Yorker, but I married a wonderful Texas man that I met at the airport. And so we'll be married 28 years this December. And we have one son. My husband is Ted. My son is Benjamin, and he's 27 years old. And he also lives about 5 minutes from us.
Nice. I have to know how you met your husband at the airport.
Oh, my gosh. Isn't that something?
Yes.
My mother and father were all New Yorkers, and my father worked for the JCPenney Company, and they moved their corporate headquarters to Plano, Texas. So my parents saw it as a wonderful adventure, so off to Texas they went. And initially, before they left, my mother said, at the time I was working in Washington, I had left New York and I was working in Washington, D.C. and living in Northern Virginia. And my mother said, oh, don't worry, after Dad retires, we're going to come back and live in Northern Virginia and be near you. I'm an only child. And so, that made sense. So I said, sounds good. So after about a week in Texas, my mother calls me up. She says, it's December and it's 60 degrees and sunny here. We're never coming back. So when my father retired, they retired to Austin, and they said, would you consider moving out here? I really wasn't rushing to do it, but I often say, God had another plan. It was, I think, December 23rd, maybe. It was right before Christmas, and I was driving home from work. A teenager ran a stop sign and totaled my car.
Oh.
I walked away without a scratch. But after that ordeal, the next morning on a red eye, I flew because I was going home for Christmas, flew to Dallas, got off the plane. It had been a rainy night. I had been up all night. I looked terribly disheveled. My parents were like, what the heck happened to you? I said, I was in an automobile accident. And they were like, oh, no. I was like, oh, I'm fine. Don't worry. But I'm moving to Texas because I just had this. I was older. I couldn't remember. I worked crazy hours. I'm an attorney by education, and I had no life. And I said, I'm starting new.
Yeah.
And so they were like, oh, wonderful. So eventually I moved to Texas and I'm living here. And my parents say, you're not married, you're older, you don't have any kids. We don't want to do the whole Christmas tree thing. Let's go on a cruise. So, okay, we'll go on a cruise. So we have to go to the Austin airport to fly to wherever we needed to go. And at the airport, we meet this lady and her son. He's taking his mother, to the wedding of her sister, who's getting married for the first time at like 70.
Oh, wow.
Which is amazing. And my father had spent a lot of time in Asia. My mother-in-law is Vietnamese and Chinese, and my father had spent a lot of time in Asia. My parents had been to China. My father and my mother-in-law get to talking. They become best friends, and we're all on the same flight together. My father says, can we invite them to sit with us? This is back when Southwest Airlines had the seats you could like face each other. I'm sure it wasn't very safe, but
it was more fun that way.
But it's more fun. And we all sat together. My husband and I exchanged business cards. And when I got back to Austin, he invited me on a date. We liked each other very much. 7 dates later, he proposed. I got married. And here we are 28 years later.
Something else. Something else.
Yeah, so it's quite something. I was very cute because my husband is 10 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. And I was 39 years old when I got married, just a few months away from turning 40. So he said, let's get married in December. And that way you can tell your friends you got married in your 30s because you won't have turned 40 yet. So that was
and he
fun.
got married in his 20s, right?
20s, right.
Yes. It must have been a big switch to move from the Northern Virginia, New York, the East Coast to Texas.
It was a shock to my system.
Yeah.
Because you have to keep in mind, Austin, it has grown tremendously. But when I arrived, Austin to me seemed like a little honky-tonk Western town.
Yeah.
And, it's the 6th Street is like the main drag, and it's mostly clubs, and they call themselves the live music capital of the world because it's all the clubs have the little bands playing and whatnot. Just seemed very small. Yeah. And I was like, gosh, when I first got here, I was like, what the heck did I do? Oh my gosh, this is did I make a mistake? Is this going to work out? But I fell in love very quickly with Texas, and I'll always. I mean, Texas brought me my husband. I can't complain. He's a wonderful man,
right?
And I'm very happy here. And I must confess that because some people, if you like 4 seasons, you may not be most comfortable in Central Texas. But I will tell you, I will never miss shoveling snow.
Yeah. And it's funny because snow is a part of life, obviously, in Northern Virginia and more so in New York.
Yes, yes.
But I don't mind. The shoveling snow is different than having a cold winter day where there's snow on the ground. It is a beautiful time of year.
It is beautiful. It is definitely
shoveling
beautiful.
Snow is a little bit of a different story. Yeah. Well, how did you land then in doing traditional foods, which is what your cookbooks have been all about?
Yes, both my first book, The Modern Pioneer Cookbook, and my second book, The Modern Pioneer Pantry, all revolve around traditional foods. And this was really how I was raised. Mm-hmm. My parents both lived through the Great Depression, World War II, all of that. And everything was made homemade. My mother made everything homemade. She was a wonderful cook, wonderful homemaker. And she was very cute because she, I'm telling you, the woman was wiping the sweat off her brow when I got married at 39, because she raised me, as she would call them, teaching me the gentle arts of domesticity. And the fact that she got a lawyer, not a homemaker, not a mother and a wife, and so she was very happy, and she adored my husband, and she's passed away at 98 years old, but she lived a long time. But it's So it's something that I was raised with. And even as a single girl living and working in both New York and then in the DC area, on Sunday, I was roasting a chicken and making bone broth. And we would just call it broth back then. And my girlfriends, I would say, oh, come on over if you're hungry. I'm roasting a chicken. And I would laugh because they would say, wow, you live like an adult. And I'd say, we are adults, we're all single, but we're adults.
Yeah.
And just kind of using all these skills that my mother gave me. She taught me how to cook, how to clean, how to iron, how to sew, how to garden, how to run the home, And so I had a little townhouse in Alexandria, and I just went about living my life and cooking and doing whatever the case may be. Sometimes you fall a little way away from it, as a lawyer, you can imagine long hours and all of that. You can lose some of it. But once I got married, I wanted to feed my son and my husband as well, the same way my mother fed me, very nutrient dense food. And so I just basically used the skills she had taught me. And then, as you know, my son was diagnosed in kindergarten with very severe dyslexia. And the schools really weren't prepared to help him. And they said the best we can do is maybe try to do some intervention in 4th grade. But then I went to a seminar that was held in Austin, where Dr. Sally Shaywitz came from Yale University with her husband, who were both neurologists. And she said, you can't wait. You need to start the intervention right away. So I spoke to the little school he was going to. There was nothing they could do to help. I spoke to our little public school. They said, no, we're really not prepared. And it was actually the public school that recommended homeschooling. So I knew nothing about homeschooling. But we forge ahead, and there's no Facebook, there's no Instagram, there's nothing. And I'm living in a little town, and I'm saying, what the heck am I going to do? And our son is extremely outgoing. And I said, I'm going to need a social circle. So there was, what is it called? My Yahoo or Yahoo?
Yeah. Or MySpace, something like that.
Something like that.
Right.
And I just put up a little group and a little sign, what you would call it. And I said, hi, I'm Mary Schrader. I have a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, whatever, he has very severe dyslexia. I'm going to be homeschooling. Hello, here we are. Want to join us? So a handful of ladies were like, yay, we're so glad you're out there. We want to form a group. So we formed a group, and we just forged ahead, and we would have field trips, and, we would do things together and try to school them together. I was also using a college student to help with who was learning how to become a reading therapist, help with the reading therapy. And then as they got a little older, sometimes we would pool our monies and hire a teacher, often someone who was retired, to do like math and science, the hard subjects, and so on and so forth. And then eventually he went on to a brick and mortar high school. And it was very cute because the teachers would say, you're so well behaved, and you raise your hand, and you don't have a cell phone. And they were like, and you seem very happy. He said, look, I was homeschooled for 8 years. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm going to be happy every day.
I'm going to be happy every day, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, he got a big kick out of that. But I, being an older mother, because by the time our son was born, I'm now in my 40s.
Yeah.
And the other mothers were much younger than me. As a matter of fact, there was one mother who was so young, her mother and I were the same age. And Sally Fallon's book had come out called Nourishing Traditions.
I've heard of that
and
book,
it was published 1998, I think, maybe 99, somewhere around there. And, here I am. My mother loved it because I said, oh, Mom, the lady says eat butter. She says, I'm vindicated. She never went the margarine route. She said, margarine's going to make you fat. Yeah. Eat butter. But it was very cute. And so the book came out, and I had got it, and I was reading it and talking with my mom about it. And we were getting a big kick out of how what we enjoyed doing was coming back into fashion. Well, these mothers, the children would have all these different maladies. And one day I was sitting and talking with one of my girlfriends, and she said, I don't know what to do. My child's not growing, not eating, has rashes and whatnot. I said, have you ever seen the book Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon? It's all about, going back to traditional cooking. I think it could really help your son. So she got it and her son, and she started making bone broth. And she's like, wow, he's doing so much better. He doesn't have all these gut problems and so on and so forth. And then the other ladies were like, oh, what are you doing? And so I was reminiscing with her a while back, and I said, wasn't it wonderful how we all got into Nourishing Traditions? And she said, Mary, you gave us all the book. Because I would buy, and I laugh when I look at Amazon, how it says purchase 20 times,
You bought this yesterday.
Right. But the thing was, most of them were struggling. And most of them didn't know how to cook very well to begin with, because they didn't necessarily have stay-at-home moms or anything like that. They had working mothers and fast food and this, that, and the other thing. And so one day, one of the women says, you know how to make all this stuff, don't you? And I said, oh, yeah, I've been all my life. My mother raised me, making this. She said, great. We're coming to your house every Saturday morning. The husbands will take the older kids, we'll bring the nursing babies, and you're going to teach us. You're going to work your way through teaching us what you know. And it was very cute, because in my first book, The Modern Pioneer Cook, I think I actually start with a very simple quick bread, and then we go to a sandwich bread made, which I don't really cook like that, but I made a sandwich bread with white flour and packaged yeast, because when I had the ladies here, and we moved on to sourdough, and I had said, okay, today we're going to learn how to make a sourdough starter. One lady burst out almost in tears, I don't even know how to bake. And then it was cute, because my other girlfriend said, they looked at her and they said, thank God you spoke up. I don't know how to bake, So I was like, okay, we're going to start.
Really had to go back to the basics. Yes.
And then it's very cute, because when I talk, a lot of these ladies I still know to this day, and I'll laugh about that. And all these years later, they'll say, oh, I'm so hardcore now. And so it just went on like that. Sometimes I would go to other people's homes, and I did this all for free. I'm very passionate about it. I want to teach. I want to preserve these skills. This is our ancestors learned these things through a millennia, and to pass these traditions down from one generation to the next, so that they could be as healthy as possible under often fairly harsh conditions.
Right.
And they could conceive healthy children. They could raise healthy children. They could keep the perpetuation of the human race going. And it seems maybe, I don't know, starting somewhere around the mid 1600s, we threw it all out the window. And little by little by little, and by the 1800s, we had white flour and white sugar. We got so away from 50,000 years or more, of knowledge. So I wanted to teach this. I was very happy to teach this. And it just kept going and going and going. Eventually, my son graduates from high school. He goes off to college. He and my husband say, you're really good at this. And I was just thinking, I could start a website or something. And they said, you're really good at this. And my husband said, I'll man the camera. You stand at the kitchen island and just do your classes, and I'll film you. And I was like, oh, that's such a good idea. And I said, okay, maybe we'll do 15 videos. This is very niche.
Yes.
I didn't expect, as many people to be interested in it, 30-minute meals or something.
Yeah.
And we went along, and I worked my way through little by little. We roasted a chicken, then we did chicken bone broth, and little by little, we're going on our way. And I'm putting the videos up, and I'm getting a lot of subscribers on YouTube, a lot of comments. People are saying, you're the grandmother I never had. Thank you. Keep going, keep going. I just kept going. I can't even tell you now, this is 7 years into it, and maybe I have 700 videos and
wow.
over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. It's the joy that brings to my heart, that there are this many people interested in learning this and preserving this. it couldn't make me happier. And so that's the whole journey.
And then you went on to write cookbooks. So what happened? Is it because of your Mary's Nest on YouTube that a cookbook publisher reached out to you, or did you propose an idea and reach out to them?
No, I really, really was just very busy, doing the YouTube channel and the website. And I really wasn't thinking, of writing any sort of proposal or doing anything like that. And one day I got an email from someone and I just ignored it. I thought it was spam. Why would Penguin Random House be writing to some home cook in the Texas Hill Country? You get a lot of spam. And my husband, who is very smart he's a software developer by his profession. Basically now, though, we just work together. He's retired from that, but I always say couldn't have done any of this without him. He was absolutely amazing in terms of how he helped me. And actually, it's because of him I got the opportunity to write these cookbooks, because he saw the email and he said, "Did you see the email from Random House?" I said, "Oh, yeah, it's spam." He said, "Honey, it's not spam," because he knows how to read the, whatever comes in the line.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm so not tech savvy when I talk about these things. And he said, "No, that's a legitimate email." I said, "You're kidding." So I looked the man's name up on LinkedIn, and sure enough, he's an editor with Penguin Random House for their DK imprint. And we always use DK books, homeschooling, and always thought they were very beautiful. And so he had shared his phone number, and I called him and I said, "Please forgive my delay. I thought you were a spammer." So we had a good laugh over that. And he said, "I have to tell you, I was looking for how to make sauerkraut, a naturally fermented sauerkraut, on YouTube, and you came up."
Oh,
and
God.
I saw you making sauerkraut, and you were very thorough and very detailed. And you had this really long form video on YouTube. There was no 3 minutes, nothing fast, no hands. You were actually like a teacher talking and putting this together. And I said to myself, I think I'd like this lady to write a cookbook first. And he must have looked at maybe some other videos, and he said, "She has a real niche. And this isn't a niche we've thoroughly explored, so let me contact her." So that's how the ball started rolling. And I was such a newbie. I knew nothing about the publishing industry. And thank God he is a wonderful man. And I think in the cookbook that you have, the Modern Pioneer Pantry, I called him and the photographer and the book and the food stylist and the book designer the dream team, because they're very good at making dreams come true.
Yeah.
But he, the first time around with the Modern Pioneer Cookbook, the first cookbook, I did not understand anything, and he had to really help me, because there's just so many words they can fit on a page. They need room for a picture if there's going to be a picture with the recipe. And they generally just they call it the spread. And then there's the thing in the middle, the gutter, and the words can't go over. And I would just write, and I really cater to beginners. But even if you're farther along on what I call your traditional foods journey, I think my books are very helpful, because I take people on the whole journey. I start very easy, then I go to medium, and then things that are more complex. But I'm such a detailed creature that I write very detailed recipes. And they would go on for pages, and he'd be like, "Okay, it's got to be 500 words on a page and a room for a picture. Or if we're not doing a picture, then you can do 500 on one page. It's got to be a spread." And he would give me these big charts, and it was like, oh my gosh, okay, it would say spread and this and that. And they used all these terminologies, hero, which meant like a full page picture.
Yeah.
I had such an education, and it was really quite cute, because I would call him up, or we'd have a Zoom call or something, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry, I'm so new to this. Can you explain this?" And he'd be like, "Oh no, I'm the one who's sorry." He just does cookbooks, and he works with cookbook authors who may have written cookbooks previously, and he's like, "No, I have to explain. Let me be very detailed with you." And so we went through that whole process, and then he'd edit it. And I find it's quite amazing working with a big publishing house, because their level of detail, first of all, my editor, his level of detail at editing what I would write to try to keep my voice and keep the stories that I share. As we talked about, I really wanted to create a living book, a book that shared a lot of stories, a lot of detailed information to make it interesting to the reader, not just a bunch of recipes. And he was very good at helping me edit it down and tighten things and so on and so forth. But what I wasn't prepared for was when he said, "We will be coming to your house, me, your editor, the book designer, a food photographer, and a food stylist. And we'll be here with you for like a week or two." I'm like, what? And so they came out here to the Texas Hill Country, and I couldn't have asked for a better team. And we had the same team for the second book. And it's such a learning experience, because they basically take over your kitchen. They restyle everything on the counters and make it look very presentable. And they basically commandeer my kitchen table. And the photographer has all these interesting boards. I don't know if there's a professional term for them, but they create a background so that it doesn't, every picture looks a little different, that you don't get seeing the same background all the time. Especially my kitchen tile is very bright and colorful, and sometimes they needed something, a little more demure.
Right.
And so she sets that all up, camera equipment, fancy lights. They just take over the kitchen. It's fun. But the person, I must say, and I thought the book designer does an amazing job, and she's here and she's like, okay, we can fit the picture. We can fit this much text. She's working through all of that while the photographer's taking the picture. But the person I am the most impressed with is the food stylist. They work magic. And I love the way they can work because a lot of time is passing and a lot of heat from lamps and whatnot, and how they want to get just the right, especially with ferments, just the right amount of effervescence, just the right amount of bubbles. And the patience and getting a little honey maybe dripping off the spoon and the camera's flashing,
Yeah, they're very, very good at what they do.
They are. And Susan, who, I mentioned in the acknowledgments, is just an amazing food stylist and patience of a saint, because it's an interesting process for any of your listeners who have written cookbooks. They would know this, but those who might be interested in writing cookbooks, the approval process, especially when you're with a big publishing house, is a number of people need to look at the picture before it's approved. So the photographer is taking it, the food stylist is styling it beautifully. Then my editor is saying, okay, I like it, but move the spoon about 1/4 of an inch, or move the dish towel 1/4 of an inch. Then he gets it to where he likes it. Then the book designer says, okay, I can fit it here. I can work it here. It may be a half-size picture, maybe a full hero. We'll see what we can do. I'm going to move the text around a little. Then everybody's like, okay, I think we're good. Then he would send it quickly to some powers that be at the DK imprint, and some senior person would say, okay, either I like it or move the spoon another 1/4 of an inch. And it's amazing that how I can understand why they have to be with you for so long, because you can spend half a day taking one picture for a cookbook before everybody approves it and likes it. So it was quite an education for me. I was much better prepared for the second book.
I'm sure. Yeah. Once you go through it one time, the first time is just like anything else. There is a learning curve, but I think you said something about publishing team being a dream team. And in a lot of ways, it's really true. You did have a tremendous amount of work to do, obviously, writing the content for the book, putting it all together, and getting all the words on the page. But it's amazing how they can take those words and turn them into a book. I think traditional publishing, because of that, it's an amazing business, and a lot of really talented people in publishing houses that create these cookbooks, which I think are different than any other genre of book because of all the detail that's in them, the recipes, making sure things are accurate, and then the photography that goes along with them is its own thing also.
It really is. It's funny because before I wrote a cookbook, I would read cookbooks, collect books, 'cause I love cookbooks, but I would think, I guess in my mind, I thought, oh, this must be easier than writing a novel or some type of history book. And then when I wrote the first book, I was like, wow, this is a lot of work. This is really detailed. People who write a living book, that's an interesting cookbook, it really does take a lot, and I always enjoyed cookbook authors like Nigella Lawson, who wrote a lot. And sometimes people, I don't know how many cookbooks she wrote in her life. And I remember her being in an interview, and the interviewer, I thought, had a little bit of an attitude and said, oh, well, yeah, you say you've written 20 books, but they were just cookbooks. And she, with her sharp tongue, had some good response back for that, but explaining that, no, it's a lot more than a bunch of recipes if you really put your heart and soul into it.
Yeah, these kinds of books, and especially the one like you have done here. I mean, it's not, there are just different types of cookbooks. Yours is definitely the Modern Pioneer Pantry, rooted in who you are, what you do, what you believe in. And like you said, it's a living book about the life that you have lived, but you have a desire to help people understand this topic. So I thought what we might do is dive into what the Modern Pioneer Pantry is, because you have a method or a way of thinking about a pantry that connects to the traditional foods.
Oh, yes. And this is something I learned from my mom. I call it the Four Corners Pantry, or the Four Corners Pantry system. She didn't necessarily coin that name, but this is how she raised me, that you have your working pantry in your kitchen, and that we'll call that corner one. That's where you keep your non-perishable foods that you access on a regular basis, a daily basis. Then you have your refrigerator, great place for your fresh food, obviously, your homemade condiments, your ferments, your cultured dairy, whatever the case that might need refrigeration. Then you have your freezer, which is the refrigerator being the second corner, the freezer being the third corner, with your meats that hopefully are on the bone, your whole chickens, so on and so forth. And then your extended pantry, which is the fourth corner. And that is often nicknamed like a backup pantry or a prepper pantry. And this is where you want to store additional non-perishable foods, so that, and whatever that means to you, it might just be canned goods from your grocery store. It may be whole grain in buckets. It may be dried beans in buckets. It may be your home canned foods. Whatever the case may be, whatever types of non-perishable foods you want to store are in this extended pantry. And that allows you to stock up little by little. This isn't done overnight, maybe an extra can or two that you get on sale at the grocery store. You do this little by little. Then when food runs low in your working pantry, you don't have to run out to the grocery store. You can shop your own pantry. You can shop your extended pantry. And this is incredibly helpful. I have heard from so many people, because I've always told people, really manage, really inventory, and keep track of your Four Corners pantry system, and spend a lot of time on your extended pantry, because there's bad weather, there's sickness, there's what we went through in 2020. Yeah. Let's hope we never go through that again. But there's all of these things, job loss. There's so many things that may make it difficult for you to buy food, or to get out of the house to buy food, or your budget is tight, whatever the case may be. And I've had so many emails and comments from people who have said when they put this system into place, it was such a lifesaver because maybe they lost their job and they couldn't find another job for 6 months, but they had taken time to build up an extended pantry. And then when you put this Four Corners pantry system in place, you know what you like. You know what you want to buy. You know what you want to make homemade. You know what you want to home can. And then you always have the backbones to prepare meals that you like and that you don't need to stop at the fast food restaurant because you know driving home, okay, I have either canned beans or beans I soaked overnight, or I have some beef cubes that I pressure canned, or I have something for dessert that maybe I've got some canned pears, or I have ferments in my refrigerator. And maybe I've got some home cured meats and I've got the makings of a charcuterie platter, or maybe I have a loaf of sourdough bread on my counter, or whatever. I've got some freezer meals that I made that I didn't buy. That's in the Modern Pioneer Pantry. I have a whole section on foods that are easy to make and eat and that freeze well and that taste well when they're heated up.
Yeah.
And so this way, little by little by little, you wean yourself off of saying, I have nothing to eat. I don't have the building blocks for a meal. You stop going through the fast food line. You stop using, Uber Eats for 4 meals a week, and you begin creating a system where you know what you have in your pantry, in your Four Corners pantry, that's real food that can be properly prepared, and that in some cases is going to be, and I really say in most cases, is faster than a lot of fancy recipes. When you have the building blocks of traditional foods, how hard is it really? And I even tell people put plastic gloves on if you're queasy, to take a raw chicken, put it in a roasting pan, throw in some reasonable onions, carrots, potatoes. These are relatively inexpensive. Put this in your oven and roast it. You're not nursing some boneless, skinless chicken breast on the stovetop. You're not having, 30 ingredients. Some of the recipes I look at, I say, holy mackerel, so many ingredients and often things, you may never use. How many of us have bought and purchased spices that we find one day 5 years later in the back of our pantry because we needed a teaspoon for something? You just build a pantry of foods that are easy to prepare. Yes, maybe you have to soak your beans if you want to. I'm not opposed to having canned beans too. I believe in multiple streams of food. Have canned beans, have dried beans. When you remember, soak your beans overnight and then cook them the next day. If you forget, you've got canned beans. My mother always had cannellini beans in the refrigerator, tossed with olive oil and oregano. It was a wonderful snack, when you got home and put it on a slice of piece of sourdough bread, toast that. These can even be easy dinners. It's funny. People will say, what do you do when you're just completely exhausted? I think today people call them boards, and I don't do anything fancy like that you see in some of these magnificent books on the subject. But I'll just make a platter of sliced meats, some homemade bread, open up a can of beans, toss them with olive oil and oregano, put out something that I've got in the refrigerator, maybe some giardiniera, which is the pickled vegetables. And that's dinner.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my son remembers this very well. And this was not uncommon if we were going to watch a movie. I would just throw a charcuterie platter together and call it a day. And it's cute because when he comes over now, if he's going to watch a movie with us, he's like, Mom, you making a charcuterie platter?
He said, sure, let me go to my pantry and see what I can find.
Yeah. And just keep it simple. Then you have your roast chicken, then you have your carcass. I often have chicken feet. I know a lot of people grosses them out, but I'll have my carcass. I'll throw in some chicken feet. I'll use the peelings from the carrots, the onion skins, these all have nutrition. Maybe the bottom of a celery stalk, throw that in, simmer it. And you don't need to simmer bone broth for a lifetime. 6 hours is more than sufficient for chicken bone broth. And you're going to have a beautiful gelatinous bone broth. Use that the next day to make some soup if you've got leftovers from your roast chicken. Or say you want to make something else. Say you want to bake a piece of fish and you want to serve it with white rice. A lot of people like white rice, and they're not big on brown rice. So you know what I say? Use your white rice as a conduit to get other types of nutrition into your family. Use the bone broth you made from the roast chicken in place of water. Add some butter, add some sea salt. You now are using that white rice to get that bone broth, the butter, and the sea salt into whomever you're feeding. And this is sort of the rhythm that my mother followed and that I was raised on. And then, of course, liver on Wednesday, which people are like, oh, heavens, Mary, now you're pushing the envelope. I'm not making liver. And I will tell you that I think it's in the first cookbook. I think it's in the Modern Pioneer cookbook that I show people how to make, and it's funny, God bless my son, because he was the proving ground for all of these things. And I show people how to cut the liver up when it's still a little frozen and batter dip it and fry it in tallow, beef tallow. I show people how to, render their own tallow and then have your fermented ketchup, give this to your children and say it's nuggets. And to this day, my son is like, oh, the nuggets, And I remember the first time I gave him the beef liver nuggets, he's like, what is this? I said, they're nuggets. Dip them in the ketchup. You'll love it. And he dips it in the ketchup and he eats it. He says, it doesn't really taste like chicken, but it's not bad, Mom.
Yeah. So it's neat how you do that. I see, have heard of someone doing that before. It makes a smaller piece. It kind of coats it a little bit and it makes it easier to eat. And liver is very nutritious for people. Yeah. And why Liver Wednesday? Why did you say Wednesday? Is that like a tradition?
Yes, that when I was growing up, and this was in even the public schools.
Oh, wow.
You had they gave you liver on Wednesday so that all the kids were fed a nice nutrient-dense meal. See, these were the things they knew.
Yeah.
And we've lost that. But they knew vitamin A, vitamin D. It was very important. None of us wore eyeglasses. We were fed a liver every Wednesday in school, and then fish on Friday, which harkens back to Christian traditions.
Yep.
And it was just a rhythm.
Yeah,
and roast chicken, and at home, most mothers were roasting a chicken on Sunday, having some kind of leftover soup on Monday, maybe some type of meat on Tuesday. It would usually be like a bone-in chuck roast back when you could actually buy a lot of bone-in meats. And I tell people this is so important, and the butcher will love you if you ask for a bone-in roast, because when you cook the bones, they release collagen, which cooked collagen is gelatin. That nourishes our digestive system. It allows us to absorb nutrients better. We have a much better gut health, and so on and so forth. And then Wednesday would be the liver. We'd have it at school. My mother would often have it as dinner as well. And then Thursday might be, something thrown together. Often we joked that my mother would be able to make a meal out of scraps. And I call them clear out the crisper meals. It's basically looking in the refrigerator. Well, what do I have? And what do I need to use up so that nothing, I'm especially being raised by two people who lived through the Great Depression, there's no waste. You're not throwing anything out. Yeah. So my mother would create a meal from what was ever in her refrigerator. And then we would have fish on Friday. And we'd also have fish on Friday at school. And I think on my YouTube channel, I share the tuna boat surprise, which was what we usually had at school, which was white sandwich bread held together with toothpicks, filled with something that looked like the chicken pot pie filling, but made with tuna fish.
Yeah.
And my mother would have some kind of fish dish on Friday. And then Saturday, always homemade baked beans with the hot dogs on the side, or cut up and thrown in with the beans. And then Sunday, the roast chicken, and the whole thing started again.
Repeats over again.
And it was, we never got tired of it because my mother would massage things little by little through the seasons. So the vegetables were a little different. The dairy products that she was making homemade were a little different. The ferments, we didn't, I think my mother would refer to everything as pickles, but they were ferments and she was leaving them on the counter and it was very cute. My mother was of Northern Italian heritage and my father was very funny. He was Irish descent, but he would look at this stuff on the counter and he'd say, shouldn't it be refrigerated? Isn't it rotting? And she'd be like, don't worry about it. She'd have the homemade yogurt.
That's perfectly fine. That's what we want it to do.
Yeah, we want that good bacteria. We want those bugs.
Yes. Yes. So in the pantry, then, not only do you discuss the pantry, but you go into detail about various methods of food preservation. Let's talk a little bit about food preservation just from a high level. Why is it important? And what is it about the connection between food preservation and traditional foods?
Well, I think food preservation is very important because in many aspects, the ways that food was preserved are the ways that our ancestors preserved foods. There's not a lot of variation when you talk about drying and fermentation. And before refrigeration, this is what they needed to do in order to have food to eat, especially during the winter. So drying foods, smoking foods, fermenting foods, having the crock of the sauerkraut or whatever, like with Italians, the giardiniera, whatever was significant to a particular culture, what food was available to them. This was how they were preserving their food. And what is important about this is that they knew how to maximize nutrition, especially with ferments, because a fermented food is very rich in good bacteria. And sauerkraut, for example, when you ferment it, you also increase the vitamin C. And so these people who were eating these fermented cabbages throughout the winter were able to have vitamin C, and they were also able to get all the good bacteria from the sauerkraut, which nourished their gut. And, like scientists tell us, there's so much talk today about gut health and good bacteria, and people take all these expensive supplements. All they need to do is eat some fermented vegetables on a regular basis. This is what our ancestors knew. And in the book, I also have some modern ways of food preservation. I teach, water bath canning and pressure canning and freezing, because we are, as I say, we're modern pioneers. We do have live in a modern world. We have modern kitchens and we have access to these things. So take advantage of them when preserving foods. But much of my favorite ways to preserve foods is actually through fermenting, culturing, and drying, just as our ancestors did. And cultured dairy is so easy to make. And once you learn, for example, which I believe I share in the Modern Pioneer Cookbook, the first book, how to make your own yogurt, and all you need is 2 bowls. You don't need a lot of equipment. Same with drying. There's so many things you can dry at room temperature, or if you live in a hot, dry climate, outside between 2 screens, in a slow oven. You don't necessarily need a dehydrator. Once you find you really like doing this, you can advance and buy a dehydrator. And I always tell people, always look in the thrift shops after Christmas, because a lot of people get dehydrators for Christmas and then they don't want them. And they're foolish not to want them, but sometimes they just don't know what to do with them. And so they bring it to the thrift shop on January 2nd.
Yeah, I was loving looking at the list of recipes in the About Drying and Dehydrating section. Everything from salt-dried herbs to tomato powder, apple peel powder, and then things like a spicy Texas-style ketchup, dehydrated figs, and candied citrus curls. So quite a variety of things in the drying and dehydrated section. Let's talk a little bit about the apple peel powder for a minute, because that to me is something that you're utilizing something that you could be throwing away if you peel the apples for a pie or something like that. Kind of a fall time of year. So talk a little bit about the apple peel powder.
Yes, that is an excellent thing to make. You never want to throw away your apple peels. Apple peels are very high in an ingredient that a good bacteria in our gut loves to eat. I believe the good bacteria, and you have to forgive me, I'm not a scientist, and I also have been labeled the queen of mispronunciation, but I believe it's called something like Akkermansia.
Yeah, I'm looking at it in the book here.
Okay,
Akkermansia,
yeah. And
mucinophilia.
yeah, it's got a beautiful name.
Yep.
And we don't eat enough foods to feed that good bacteria. And that good bacteria is very powerful. And so I always tell people in the fall, when you're making a lot of apple pies or you're peeling a lot of apples because you're going to water bath can apple pie filling, which I believe I have in the water bath canning section, save all those peels. And people will often say to me, well, what if I'm just like doing one apple pie and I just have a handful of peels? Can I put them in the freezer in a bag? Yes. Freeze them until you feel you have enough that you're ready to dry. And if you have a dehydrator, great. You can use the dehydrator to dry them, but you can also dry these in a slow oven. And you want to get them to the point where they're crisp. They're going to snap like a potato chip. And then what I like to do is, then there are multiple ways you can do this. If you've got a food processor or a blender, it doesn't even need to be a high-speed blender. But what I really like to use are those little coffee grinders. It takes a little more time, but it does a beautiful job. And you put your dried apple peels, and you can crush them all up with your hands. You know, this is a great task with children. You just get them to wash their hands, and then they'll love mushing up all the dried apple peels because it's like breaking up potato chips. You put them in your blender and you whirl them, or you put them in your food processor, whirl them, or the spice grinder. In the blender or the food processor, you may have to stop it periodically and push down the powder and distribute everything evenly. Then you have this wonderful shelf-stable powder, and you put this on your shelf. And then you do whatever you want with this. You can mix it into cottage cheese. You can mix it into yogurt. You can throw it into a smoothie. You can even use it as a flavoring when you're making an apple pie. You mix it with if you use a little sweetener, or you use a little tapioca, whatever you use, or flour to thicken your pie, you can throw in a little bit of that. And the level of nutrition that you're getting from something that a lot of people would have thrown out is incredible. It's the same with tomato skins. Say you have, during the pandemic, my gosh, I grew 80 pounds of Italian Roma tomatoes because we were home every day. Our son was staying with us too, and he built me raised beds, and oh, what a time we had. Well, when you split those and drop them in boiling water to get the skins to peel off, you're left with all these peels. Yeah. And then you're going to make your marinara or whatever you're going to do with your tomatoes. Dry those out. Just dry them in a slow oven and then pulverize those. And then during the cold and flu season, when you're really just longing for maybe a cup of tomato soup and maybe a grilled cheese sandwich, you have your tomato powder. It makes a wonderful, in a teacup, put a teaspoon in a soup pot, put a quarter cup in, anything like that. You know, it's this, these are not quote unquote recipes. You eyeball all of this and you get to the taste you like. Now you've got homemade tomato soup. You didn't throw out your tomato peels. I love this stuff. I could go on and on and on about it because I love not wasting. You know, I also say that if you say, oh, I don't know if I want a dried tomato peel, or apple peels, what else can I do with it? You know, I share in the first book, the Modern Pioneer Cookbook, you know, how to make a home. It's like a mock version, but it's like a homemade apple cider vinegar. Because I say, unless you have an apple orchard and you've got apple cider to spare to turn into vinegar, don't do that. Yeah. To me, it's wasteful. Yeah. Just take some apples that, you know, you've peeled or you've cut out, you know, whatever, the cores, whatever. Just set the seeds aside and just throw everything else into a jar, add in some water, add in a little bit of sugar to feed the good bacteria. And in 30 days, you're going to have what I consider is a pretty good apple cider vinegar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, scraps, these are things people throw out. Bone broth, chicken carcass, people throw this out. Stop throwing this out. These are all really useful, good things.
Yeah, and this is the perfect book to look at. I'm sure you addressed this also in your first book about literally using these things that we throw away to make another thing that we can eat or store or use. And the fermented section in this book also has a lot of interesting recipes. I love the recipe for the ginger bug. And I think this time of year, as we're heading into the fall, winter time, maybe cold and flu season, tell us a little bit about ginger bug as one of the fermented drinks.
Ginger bug is terrific because it's multi-use. I have a very detailed version of it in the first cookbook, but I couldn't write the Modern Pioneer Pantry without repeating it again in a little slightly. My editor had me tighten it a little more to squeeze it in here. But I said, we've got to get this in because in the summer months, it's your base to be used to make fermented sodas. And that's very nice if you're trying to wean children off of store-bought sodas. Yeah. And a ginger bug will introduce the good bacteria and the effervescence, and it'll help with that. But once you have a ginger bug, there's so much you can do with that. You can put that into a teacup, and this is especially wonderful when you don't feel good. You put that into a teacup, and you add in some, what I like to do is because these are living things, I don't like to put in hot boiling water. Let's be gentle with it because it's living. It's got a lot of good, it's very rich in good bacteria. You've basically taken grated ginger, a little sugar, and don't worry about the sugar because the good bacteria is gobbling up. Trust me, this does not taste sweet. I know. And you're putting in a little water and you're doing this each day, kind of like a sourdough starter in many ways, if people are familiar with that.
Feed it, right.
You're feeding it and it's going to get real effervescent. And you can use this to make some tea. And it's something that I really like to do with it. And I don't know if I share this in the cookbook per se, but take your ginger bug, mix this with honey, and put this in your refrigerator. And I will make this about this time of year. It's funny because I have the ginger right now sitting over on my cutting board. I got a beautiful big piece of gorgeous ginger at the grocery store. And take your ginger bug, mix it. If you can get local raw honey, which here in the Texas Hill Country is available to me, but I think it's available to
I think most places, if you go to a local farmer's market.
You go to a farmer's market, right?
Yeah.
Mix that and then tuck that in your refrigerator. The minute you feel you've got a cold coming on, or you've got a little scratchy throat, or maybe you've been at a party and a lot of people were hugging and kissing you and it's December and you're like, oh, did I pick up anything? Take a teaspoon of that right off the spoon. It's delicious. It'll have a little effervescence to it. It'll have the sweetness of the honey. It'll have the bite of the ginger. But I used that all last winter. I never got sick, and I think that it can be, I'm the sort of like I live in the world of integrative medicine. I'm not a zealot. I don't say eschew all, modern medicine. I feel there's a lot of good things that modern medicine brings to the table. But I like that Dr. Andrew, is his name Weil, Weil. He's an MD and he writes like New York Times bestsellers. Yeah. I like his approach. You bring in all of these integrative things. Like in the Modern Pioneer Pantry, I have a recipe for how to make a homemade cough syrup because that was always very popular. It always seems like people have a cough.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily want to buy something over the counter. They certainly can, and but the nice thing is these were the things my mother would make. She would have a little homemade cough syrup. She would have like a little old-fashioned, her version of a Vicks Vapo rub, and all these little things and that's the part in the book I talk about the healing pantry. Carve out a little area in your extended pantry where you store the things you need to make home remedies. Now, if you're really sick, I always tell people, go to the doctor, go to the hospital, whatever you need. But it's those day-to-day little cuts and scrapes and coughs and sore throats that I really like to have a little arsenal of homemade things. Elderberry syrup, a honey ginger bug mix, a homemade cough syrup, a little selection of dried herbs. Herbs grow great here in Central Texas. I live in a drought-stricken 100-degree summer area, and herbs are like weeds. They do beautiful.
Yeah, that's right.
And keep some dried thyme. Keep some, try. You can grow this stuff in pots. You can be in the city. I lived in New York City, and you have maybe a little sunny windowsill, and you can have a little fresh oregano, a little basil, a little thyme, a little rosemary. Dry these things. And then, and I show you how easy it is to dry so much of this. And then you can whirl it in a blender with some salt, and you have these magnificent seasoned salts to use throughout the fall and winter when you may not have fresh herbs. And the price at the grocery store is shocking, And what's nice about using herb salts is people don't realize herbs are very powerful.
Yeah.
Yes, they're culinary, but they're very healing. And they bring so many anti-inflammatory properties, antiviral properties, antimicrobial, antibacterial, the list goes on and on and on. And when you use these salts throughout the winter or the fall and winter, you're incorporating all this extra nutrition into your food. And what did it really cost you? Maybe you grew the herbs from seed, or maybe you bought an herb plant for $1.99. If you're going to run out to the grocery store, you're going to have to buy a little tiny package for, I don't know, what do they cost? $3.99, $4.99. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. And I think that you talking about these things that you've talked about in this book have just barely scratched the surface of what's in the book. But your explanation of it here mirrors the detail that you put into the explanation of almost everything that you have in the book. So if you love to look at cookbooks, read cookbooks, want to explore preserving food, traditional food, setting up your pantry, there's also over 115 recipes. And like I said, everything from canning, drying, dehydrating, freezing, fermenting, and pickling food. It's a beautiful book, Mary, and I can tell it is a great companion to your first book, The Modern Pioneer Cookbook.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad that you're very kind, because I can get very passionate about this and go on and on and on.
No. And you're on the perfect podcast for that, because people that are, I love to talk about it. I love to hear about it. And I also find so much joy in talking to people about different cookbooks, but none of the cookbooks are the same, because the people I talk to are never the same.
Exactly. How true.
And what we get excited about, we all love the kitchen, food, cooking, baking, and everybody comes at it from a different angle. And I just couldn't be more thrilled to have a podcast talking about something that I love, which is the genre of cookbooks, talking to people like you that just have such a passion and a joy for what they do. And I think that that's what makes cookbooks unique. And I still believe we've barely scratched the surface of people who have the capacity to do this kind of work. So many living books out there right now that aren't written yet.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah. I look forward to those, and I look forward to reading them one day.
I do too. So everybody keep your mind open about what might be possible for you, because you just never really know how something will engage you in the kitchen. You get involved with it. You take it to another level, maybe to the digital space like Mary did with her YouTube channel. And then all of a sudden you just never know. And I love that your YouTube channel gets so much traction and that people are really enjoying it. I went online and looked while we were talking. Your sauerkraut video, gosh, was like millions of views on the sauerkraut.
That's a very popular one, and it's very cute, because I will hear from people in comments and emails. They'll say, "Oh, I watched this video or that video," And often I hear a lot from beginners, and they say, but I think there was something I didn't quite understand or whatever. Then I came upon your video, and something that's very cute, because some of my videos, not necessarily the sauerkraut, but some are like an hour long. And sometimes I'll get comments and people will say, wasn't really prepared to watch a 1 hour video, but I couldn't stop watching because you answered every question I had. And people will say with the sauerkraut video, they'll say, oh, now I understand why I do this. Now I understand why I have to do, oh, okay. And everybody loves my little tip, because I don't think this is too common in the YouTube space, because the videos sometimes have to be they're a little, it's just me and my husband. We're very, just very homey filming. But some people do a little more, fancy, dramatic, multiple cameras and all of that. That's not us. But it's very cute because people will say, nobody else showed me pH strips. Now I can check the pH and I know I've got the right pH. I won't kill anybody.
Exactly. It's funny too. You mentioned, I talked to a cookbook author several months ago, and she was talking about her original videos were all just hands. She never showed her face. Mm-hmm. And she's noticed that one thing that she's getting more engagement with, people are really enjoying, is seeing her and not just her hands.
Yes.
Connecting with her and her face. So she's getting used to doing that. But she said that, her original bread and butter, no pun intended, was just her hands.
Yes. And it's funny because you do see a lot of that, and you can understand, because some people will, I know a lot of creators on YouTube, and they'll say, oh, I feel uncomfortable, or I don't feel pretty, or I don't feel this and I don't feel that. And I always say, look, I started at the age of 60.
Yeah.
I'm a senior citizen. I can't kind of wrap my mind around that, but
right.
I said, and people are telling me I'm the grandmother they never had, and I'm, a chubby little Italian lady, and I'm just trying to do the best that I can. And don't worry about it, because people see your eyes, they see your expression, and they will love you.
And they see your excitement or enthusiasm for
yes,
what it is
exactly.
you're talking about.
See your
and
enthusiasm.
That is transmitted through a camera in a way that the way we look will never, ever be able to do that.
I agree 100%.
Yes. So as we're wrapping up, I always have a question for my guests, and that is if you have a favorite cookbook and what it might be.
I actually do. And, of course, I think most cookbook authors are going to say, of course, they love their own cookbooks. But my absolute favorite cookbook is The Art of Italian Cooking by Maria Lo, L-O, its middle name, Pinto. And it is a small paperback that my mother bought the year she was married. It was actually, the book was originally published in 1948. I believe it might have been a hardback, but my mother had the 35 cents paperback printed in 1955. And the reason that she bought this cookbook was she was newly married, and my mother is of a Northern Italian heritage. So there's a lot of cream, and there's a lot of butter, and there's not a lot of tomatoes. Yet, what do we know of when we think Italian American cooking? We think spaghetti with tomato sauce, we think lasagna, we think, different things like that, the pizza pie and whatnot. And my mother loved my father very much. And my father, knowing of Italian American cooking, which most Italian immigrants were, from parts lower than Northern Italian, and the cooking that they brought to the United States, were more of the dishes we know today as Italian American cooking. And my mother wanted to make my father very happy and make things like lasagna and bake ziti, but these were not necessarily things that she grew up making. She was doing more like risotto and things like that. Her family was from the Lombardy province of northern Italy, about very alpine in many ways, about a mile from the Swiss border.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful
part
of the
beautiful
world.
area.
It is a beautiful area.
So I still have that little paperback to this day.
Yeah.
And
I got to tell you something I just read here. You're going to, I just searched for the book, The Art of Italian Cooking, and there's a woman that talked about the book and posted her recipes named Catherine Martinelli. But listen to the comment on the meatballs. Maria Pinto was my dad's first cousin. She was not only an author of 4 cookbooks, but also an attorney.
Oh my gosh, isn't that funny? How
there
about
you have
that?
It. They've gone full circle, because didn't you say that was what you were in your former life, an attorney?
Yes. Isn't that funny?
That is.
My gosh. Oh my gosh.
Well, I'll link to this book in the show notes. So if anybody wants to explore it, one thing that is fun about this show is hearing this answer. And I have to tell you that very few cookbook authors have said their own book. I have heard them say their mother's collection of recipes, like maybe she gathered them and gave it to them as a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Some church community cookbooks, but little books like this too that are kind of obscure, are favorites of a family or an individual. So this is a great example of exactly why I asked this question. And
what makes this little paperback so special to me is my mother has in her handwriting, and she always wrote she had a beautiful script handwriting, and she's written a lot in this book near the different recipes. And so that little paperback, 35 cents, 1955, with my mother's handwriting.
It's priceless.
And it's priceless.
It is totally priceless, 100%. All right. Well, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing The Art of Italian Cooking by Maria Lo Pinto. All right, Mary, as we're finishing up here, tell everybody how they can connect with you online.
Well, I think I'm pretty easy to find online. As I mentioned in the beginning, my website is marysnest.com. I'm also Mary's Nest across all social media, including YouTube, where my YouTube channel is Mary's Nest. And people can go to my website. All my YouTube videos are embedded in my website, and they can also print out any recipe that I'm talking about in the video. So they hopefully will be all set.
That's wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today, talking to us all about your new book, The Modern Pioneer Pantry, telling us about traditional foods and sharing just a tidbit of the wisdom you have about stocking your pantry and the 4-corner pantry now, which is a wonderful concept. And I think the fun part too, talking about the healing pantry that we can all start. So giving me a lot of inspiration. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, Maggie, thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight chatting with you, and also, in essence, chatting with your listeners.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.